Well, thank you for tuning in to an episode of InRange. This is the November 2017 Q&A.
I like Q&As. These are always fun.
They are very popular with the audience, too. They tend to get... Actually, these are one of the few videos that get, for the most part, viewed entirely. I think people put them in the background and listen to the audio.
Makes sense.
By the way, if you're a Patreon supporter, that's how you get to ask these questions. As well as, if you're a Patreon supporter, we do publish these as an RSS podcast feed.
Right.
So if you prefer audio over video, you can absolutely do that. So that's one of those cool Patreon benefits. Lots of questions, so let's just go ahead and get going.
5 pages. Fire it up.
Some of them are what was done or do. We'll get those out of the way first.
Okay.
So Trent G. What would you change about your what was done or do project if legal constraints weren't a factor?
Well, the only two things that legal constraints are a factor on are whether it's full auto and what the barrel length is. So if it weren't a factor at all, yeah, I'd have a full auto trigger group.
Sure.
I don't know that I'd really hardly ever use it, but it doesn't hurt anything to have it. Might be useful in some situation at some point.
Now, we've said in other videos in the past that full auto wasn't really a necessary thing to have even in a military rifle, and we've heard people go back and forth, even people that are veterans, saying that I agree and disagree with that. If you're going to have that capability on your gun, there's a training thing involved, so it doesn't become a panic switch.
Sure.
But I agree. If there weren't legal constraints, you probably would have built one 14.5-inch gun and one 10-inch gun because of NFA. That would have been the interesting differential. And then probably had a select fire auto group or fire control group.
I don't really know that I'd want something less than the barrel length we've got on yours. You really do start to lose some ballistic capability.
You do.
On the other hand, at 10 inches, you end up with something that's functionally pretty equivalent to an AK-74 SU, a Krinkov.
Which is awesome.
Which is a really handy little thing. So maybe what we would have ended up with is a carbine and a submachine gun.
Well, yeah, so a 10-inch would have been more like that quote-unquote door kicker, although that's an overused term at this point already on our own channel. And the 14-inch can push out to 300 yards.
Yeah.
Which is, again, most of what you'd ever need.
But I think 14.5 with a flash hider would remain kind of the default standard general purpose.
I agree. We came to the conclusion that the 14 point, because we couldn't go, well, because I could not go shorter without NFA, the 14.5-inch was it turned out that was not the specialist, the standard.
Yeah, that's kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So.
All right, CJ. Which bolt carrier groups did you end up using what was done to do rifles? I heard Karl mention in one video that he was using a faxon gunner lightweight. Well, that's actually not true. I don't even have a faxon lightweight. I do have a lightweight bolt carrier group in the gun from time to time. We've tried a whole bunch. We've had a standard, what you would call a full auto bolt carrier group. We've had semi-auto bolt carrier groups. We've had a lightweight bolt carrier group in there. I think it's an ADI. We've had the one that we did the most work with, although the video is not out yet, is we have a Gemtech adjustable.
Right, for use with a suppressor.
So it has a suppressed and unsuppressed. It allows you to modify the gas settings of an AR at the bolt carrier group. This is one of those things that people argue about endlessly, and I don't think it matters that much.
Really hasn't had any impact on the project at all, with the exception of the functionality of the suppressor capable one.
Yeah, that's different because that's a specialized component. I would say that the weirdness, or not the weirdness, but the big thing people are going on in terms of lightweight bolt carrier groups, it does slightly diminish the recoil impulse in the gun.
Okay.
But it does do it at the potential cost of reliability. You want to get the dwell time right on an AR, especially with 5.56.
Yeah.
And more often than not, a heavier bolt carrier group is better for reliability than a light one. So if you're going to do a lightweight thing, you're doing it as sort of a hack, and you got to time the gun according to it. On the what was done to do guns, though, we've dropped them in and had zero issues. You put a lightweight in, worked. Put a regular bolt carrier group in, worked. Put a Gemtech one in, worked. As long as you buy a quality bolt, the bolt carrier group doesn't matter that much. Yeah. And so we're not going to really have an official video on the bolt carrier group besides one on the Gemtech because it's an interesting component.
Yeah.
Sean G. How tight are the what would Stoner do rifles fit up in terms of mating the aluminum upper to the polymer lower? So he's talking about the wobble in the upper and lower receiver.
I haven't noticed any. I know I can tell you the push pins on mine at least are super tight.
They're tighter on yours than they are on mine, either.
Yeah. Which is a good thing because they're also not captive pins. That's one of the downsides of the GWAX lower.
We forgot to mention that in the GWAC lower thing. So they are not capture pins, and that is definitely a step backwards. You definitely would want those captured if you could. The problem was that when they were manufacturing, they were designing that as a polymer. They tried to drill holes to have capture pins, and they realized it actually weakened the gun too much.
Yeah, again, because it's polymer, and they didn't specifically change something to allow for captured pins, it's a trade-off.
In terms of the question, though, about the wobble between the upper and the lower, I see this question quite a bit from people in terms of considering the quality of fit and finish of an AR. Neither yours nor my what would Stoner do rifle seem to have any wobble at all. In fact, it's a pretty tight fit.
Yeah.
Yours is tighter, but there's no wobble there. However, in high power, when I shot high power, which is a precision event, people freaked out about that wobble. Oh my God, the wobble. And there was even little wedges you could put in. They were called a wedge.
I've seen the Acu wedge.
The Acu wedge, which was supposed to take away, and it did effectively diminish the wobble, albeit at the cost of wearing out and egging out some of the pinholes in the gun over time. We actually did this in high power, which has nothing to do with the What Was Stoner Do project. We took out one gun that had severe wobble and one gun that had a completely tight fit with an Acu wedge. The reality is, it matters zero.
Well, the barrel, the bolt, and the sights are all attached to the top part.
Doesn't matter.
So it doesn't really.
All the accuracy is contained in the top. Now, obviously, if you have some ridiculous one that's about ready to fall off, you've got a problem. But even what most people would consider extreme wobble in terms of the gun being reliable or being accuracy dependent or having an accuracy diminishment as a result, it's not there.
Yeah,
it's not.
I can see it being an aesthetic issue, not wanting your gun to rattle around like a 1911.
Agreed, but in terms of function, it's irrelevant, in my opinion. So we got a bunch about matches now.
Okay.
Levi C. Of all the odd rifles you two have used in 2GACME, which rifle comes to mind, or rifles, of ones you had the most fun shooting with, regardless of how well you placed?
Well, when I hear that, what I'm thinking is, what gun was fun despite the result being a craptastic score?
Sure.
And honestly, there have been a couple of bolt rifles that I find fun when they run. The 1917 Enfields, I enjoy shooting those at matches, although I always do terribly because it's a bolt action. Beyond that, any of the high quality semi-autos. The FAMAS was a lot of fun for at least the first half of the match. The Valmet was a lot of fun.
I have a few. What comes to mind, I don't think of this as necessarily, it's regardless of how you play. So that means you could have done well or not.
Yeah.
I will tell you right off the bat, the one that's the most fun for me is the M1.
Oh, yes.
We actually place well with the M1, but that's not because of that. The M1...
It's just a really good gun to shoot.
It's got some magic. It really does. It's kind of like the AR in terms of you pick it up and use it and it just works and it's great and you hit what you want to hit with it.
Yeah.
It's not hard to use. It's a fantastic gun.
I should have thought of that one.
So the M1, although we place well with it, I think the M1 is there for me. The G43, even though it's got some weirdness in terms of the German one, that's fun to shoot.
I was expecting you to say the G43.
The other one, which is a complete piece of crap, although I had more fun with it than I should have, was the Gewehr 8. I found that once it had been converted in the 14/whatever/whatever/whatever conversion that uses stripper clips with the right ammo, that gun was weird because it's such an archaically old bolt gun that was built by a commission that should be a piece of garbage, but modernized, with the exception of the sights being regulated to like 7,000 yards. It's actually fun to shoot. Okay. It kind of handles kind of neat, and it's neat to use this old clunky. This feels like it's a Mosin, but it's actually reliable kind of gun.
Okay.
And so I would say those three.
Nice. Yeah, I've never used a Gewehr 8 yet.
You should use mine sometime.
Yeah.
Then I'll use something good, and that'll be interesting. Pokeroots. I've asked this before, but maybe you've answered it before. But if I wanted to get into collecting CNR, but also participate in matches like 2-Gun, where would you suggest one starts?
Well, I got two answers for that. One is find a cool CNR gun and then shoot 2-Gun with an AR. The other is 1917 Enfield.
Yes, I would agree. There's a couple things to this question that caught my eye. One is starting to collecting CNR. Well, you can get your CNR license, which makes that a much easier endeavor, so I'd recommend that. If you're going to bring a bolt gun to something like 2-Gun, bring the best one you can, and you've already said this. The 1917 really is the gun. There's others, but the 1917 pretty much does the best you're going to do.
Good sights, good trigger, ammo that's not that difficult to get, which can be an issue with CNR rifles.
True. However, matches like 2-Gun is a bigger problem. There's just not many of them.
That's true. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, and it's very clear based on the audience response to the content we put out on InRange, there's a real demand for this. There's a demand for 2-Gun or 2GACME style events, well, across the United States, if not internationally. And it appears that there's just not a lot of people willing to provide that sort of a situation or solution.
Yeah.
There's all the 3-Gun. You bring a bolt gun to a 3-Gun event and just forget it, it's over. Like, it's just, you can't even do it.
Well, Oh, yes.
You could not finish a stage. You
Yes.
can't finish a stage.
Not the 3 guns I've been to. 3 gun matches I've been to.
Maybe there's some rare ones. So the challenge there is, if you're going to start with a CNR, the 1917 is a good one. The problem is finding a match environment that will not allow you to use it, because many would allow you to use it, to be even have a chance of finishing a stage with it.
Yeah. I would like to think that in 5 years there will be a national organization of 2-gun matches like the one in Tucson.
Well, I don't like the idea of a national organization. I've said that before. I think that a national organization might be problematic. We see this with 3-Gun Nation and stuff, and it affects the environment of the match in a potentially negative way.
How about a national proliferation?
That I agree with. And so we are seeing some of this, and maybe because of InRange, maybe not. We've got 2-Gun here. We've got AZ 2-Gun up in Phoenix. Now both of those are Arizona things. We've got Tiger Valley, which we just recently did. We've got Red October, which isn't 2-gun but has a 2-gun feel to it. We've got there's some growth coming there. I think we'll see it over time. Oh, Rio Salado up in Phoenix again is embedding 2-gun into their 3-gun event.
Right.
So,
yeah,
this is something you're going to have to push for. If it's something you want, either you're going to have to stand up and try to run it, which is hard, or go to the local venues of people that are already running matches and try to encourage them.
Yeah.
Because show them the videos. Go, hey, this is cool. But that's the best I can say to that. Brandon A. Karl, I'm new to 3-gun / 2-gun. I want to be practical, but find that the FAL and PTR 91 fit me perfectly and are the only rifles that feel natural. Is it just my fascination that the rifles are clouding my judgment, or is it possible that in theory I can keep up with AR-15s in a limited division since they don't really have a heavy division?
No, you'll never keep up with AR-15s.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Ain't gonna happen.
In fact,
go ahead and run it. Have fun with it if that's what you want to shoot.
Enjoy it. Don't be. And there are matches that do have heavy divisions. Maybe there are others in your area. 2-gun doesn't, for example. We don't really give a specificity for specific cartridge types. Some events do have a heavy. There are some matches. I think up in Raton, New Mexico, the NRA runs. The Whittington Center has they call it the not Iron Man, but something like that, where it's like heavy metal,
which
is 308 and 45. So there are venues for that, but I think you answered your own question when you said, "Is it just my fascination that's clouding my judgment?" And I don't mean to be rude, but I think yes.
Yeah, it is.
They just don't keep up. They're cool guns. I'm not saying don't enjoy them.
And they're good military guns too.
Yeah.
Certainly for their time period, they're just not as suitable as the AR for competition.
The intermediate cartridge is a thing.
It's a huge thing.
And that's a thing in military purposes. Well, there are times when 308 applies. Don't misinterpret that. But the intermediate cartridge is a thing. Whether it's 545 or 556 or even 7.62 by 39, it is such a huge advantage to have that limited recoil and high capacity.
Yeah.
That any gun that's chambered in an intermediate cartridge automatically starts beating things like a FAL.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Wish it was a better answer, really. Thomas B. Is competition necessary to improve skill / stress inoculate, or is time stress and people seeing your score sufficient? In other words, or example, will you get more from a rifle timed match than, say, a Project Appleseed shoot?
There are pros and cons to both, but I don't think either one should be neglected. There are things I think that you absolutely get from competition that you won't get otherwise.
Well, what about the difference between a time match and an Appleseed shoot, for example? So run and gun like we do, a 2-gun, or Appleseed, which is much more marksmanship heavy.
Again, you're developing different skills. There's some stress to having your scores up there in public with everyone else. That's not the same as when the beep goes off and you know you only have 60 seconds to accomplish a task. That's a different environment, and I think it's a very valuable one to practice.
You're right on. I agree 100%. I think that neither one should be neglected, and both skill sets are applicable. So, but they complement each other. So Appleseed, I don't know exactly, but like high power has a time part where it's got 60 seconds to do X, but it's 10 rounds. Like it's ridiculous amount of time. But there's still that thing of having your ego on the line and your score on the line and people watching you and all the things there. So there is some stress inoculation just from that. However, Appleseed and high power are marksmanship-oriented emphasis environments. So what you learn from things like Appleseed are the fundamentals.
Right.
The fundamentals, when you bring them into 2-gun or 3-gun or a stress-timed event, help you in those events. So the stress inoculation from a timed event will help you do better in Appleseed or high power, but the fundamentals in Appleseed will help you do in a stress event.
Right.
So neither should be neglected.
Yeah.
So both. James L. I'm interested in competition like 2GACME that you seem to have out west in Arizona. We kind of answered this already. How do I find events like this near me? Everything I find is local bench rest, marksmanship, or either. We get this a lot. There's no good answer.
Yeah, there really isn't.
You either have to start it yourself, or you have to go to the local matches and go to your 3-gun guy, or go to your USPSA guy, or go to your XYZ practical shooting guy and go, hey, I want to see something like this at my club. Can we do it?
Yeah.
I don't have a better answer. I'm sorry. I wish we could see more growth. Sort of answered that earlier. All right, so these are more gear-based questions.
Okay.
Mark S. Karl, being the AK guru. Yeah, I use AKs a lot. Is it better to run a red dot on a railed gas block or the side rail?
Both. That way you line up the 2 dots,
Oh!
and you get super precision.
If you put an EOTech behind a red dot or something like that. You know, it's funny. A lot of people do that whole Ultimac or Picatinny rail on the gas tube thing, and they like it, and it's an effective solution. It provides you a very low bore offset on an AK.
I think that's the main element.
You have to be careful with your optic and where your batteries are because they can overheat.
Now, there's some products out there for mounting them on the rear sight block in place of your rear sight.
Good point. There's that too.
There are options there.
There's that as well. Personally, as a personal preference, I don't care for my red dot that far out.
Well, when you have it that far out, it does reduce the field of view through the optic.
Well, yeah, with the red dot both eyes open, it just appears as a dot anyway.
Okay.
But I find that when the red dot's closer to me, from the way my brain perceives things, it just vanishes more.
Okay.
It becomes more like a heads-up display. Versus when I have the red dot way out there, for me, it feels like I'm looking through a tube. Like it just, that's just what how my brain works with it. I prefer the side rail. Now, the side rail has limitations in that it does add bulk to the gun. You can't fold the stock anymore unless you have a specialized stock like a PT1 from Zenico.
Yep.
You can get very low bore offset side rails from people like RS Regulate.
Yep.
So you can fix that problem as well. Or some of the better Eastern European sighting systems like the Obzor we did a review on. That thing's awesome on the side rail. That's a really good one as well. And the side rail has a really one other cool benefit in that it truly does retain zero.
Yeah, you can take that optic off anytime you want.
And so you can change what you need. You need a magnified optic now, you can throw it on, take it off, put on a red dot, put it on, take it off. You can't do that as much with one of those forward mounting red dots. You're kind of stuck to the red dot.
Ironically, by putting on a Picatinny rail, in some ways you're making the gun a little bit less modular.
Yeah, but if you're going to keep the gun in that config, then you're good to go.
One other interesting thing to throw in here that he didn't mention in his question, but one of the issues I always ran into was, well, I've got this cool side rail optic, but my AK didn't have a side rail.
Oh, yeah.
And we actually found a product that we need to do some work on and actually review, but it is a side rail that bolts on using the fire control pins.
It was really cool, actually.
As far as we can tell so far, it seems great. But we haven't actually done any real serious shooting with it to see how well it holds zero and how durable it is. But that seems to be a potential cool option for someone who wants a side rail mount, but doesn't want to have to like send their AK to a gunsmith and have someone try and rivet or weld on a side rail.
I put a side rail on my gun with a drill and some books in my feet, but it can be done. You can kind of pass it. Yeah, you just got to make sure it's straight. But yes, that is an interesting product, and we should put some work into that.
Yeah. So I think ultimate answer, both are fine. There's some pros and cons each way.
I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with either, and it's really a personal preference.
Yeah.
Eric B. What are your thoughts on linear comps / blast cans sound forwarding device muzzle attachments? Does the benefit of less perceived concussion offset additional weight? Does it really make you a better neighbor at the range with the trend of AR, AK pistols, or SBRs? So these are the things that they're like a little can or cup, and they focus things forwards. In fact, if you look back at World War II, early flash hiders kind of look like that. A little bit. Yeah.
I have limited experience with those, but I am immediately dubious of anything called a linear compensator being in any way less obnoxious than a bare muzzle.
Well, I would say this. From what I've dealt with and seen them, I haven't seen a lot of them. Some of them do truly force the sound forward. Okay. They kind of have this it's like a speaker. They're kind of coning the sound away from the shooter.
Okay.
Are they better than a muzzle brake? Well, yeah, they're a lot better than a muzzle brake.
Yes.
Are they better than a bare muzzle? I guess it depends on the manufacturer. The ones that I've seen are better than a bare muzzle.
Okay.
However, I still prefer a flash hider. Flash hiders, dust signature, all that stuff that can come from the benefits of a decent flash hider, to me are better than even a linear comp. So, do they work? Some of them do work. Do they provide less perceived concussion? I think yes. If I was going to put something on the end of my muzzle, though, I'd still go with a flash hider.
Seems legit to me.
So, Paul S. During the various matches and tactical training you guys have attended, have you found one type of load-bearing equipment, chest rig, war belt, etc., to be generally more useful or comfortable than others? Has one method been generally better than another for carrying equipment while running, jumping, crawling around in match environments?
I really tend to like the belts. I don't know if it's fair or not, but I've never really found myself adjusting well to chest rigs. And I really, now, and this may be something that's skewed by two guns specifically, but I've never been able to do well with a tactical vest. Because I always want to put my pistol on my belt. I don't want to use a drop-like holster, and I don't want to use one of those like holsters on the vest. And so I have a couple of really cool tactical vests. I have a great South African one, but there's no conceivable way to mount a pistol with it.
True.
Which for the military isn't a big deal, because typically you're not going to be issued a pistol, you just have a rifle.
Yep.
In general, for competition that I've been doing, that belt setup, battle belt, with a holster on one side, a dump pouch on the back, and a couple of mag pouches, that works really well. It's easy to take on and off. It tends to be pretty stable. It holds all the ammo I need, and it leaves me pretty flexible to move around obstacles.
I like both. I have a hard time deciding between one or the other, so I tend to combine them. In fact, at Tiger Valley, I had a battle belt on that was limited in terms of stuff on it, and then had a chest rig on top of that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that either one necessarily provides a big difference in terms of comfort or what's the word I'm looking for? Ergonomics? Not ergonomics. Yeah, maybe ergonomics. But the belt, I would say if you were going to go with only one and you're only going to pick one, you're never going to change anything. If I was going to have only one option, I think I would go with the belt as well.
Okay.
The belt limits you on the amount of ammunition you can have on board. In our environments, the things we do, typically speaking, a couple mags is more than enough. Now that, of course, is not necessarily real world. If you're going out into a combat zone or you're going to be out for extended durations of time, you may need more ammunition than you can really comfortably place on a battle belt.
But that's fine, because if you're actually doing that, the government you're working for will have issued you with all sorts of magazine-carrying stuff, and you will have no choice about what you wear. It'll be that.
And that's when you start getting into armor, load-bearing vests, and all that, which is a whole other bag of worms. But I guess if I was going to pick one, I would recommend the war belt. And it's another thing that's one of the things we talked about in some of the other videos, which I think is some people don't think about unless they do enough of the kind of stuff that we're doing or other types of things. Being able to take that stuff on and off quickly and easily is a huge advantage.
It really is nice.
So you go back and you saw the guys in World War I, a lot of that load-bearing stuff was designed to be, you could add more and more to it. So you'd have the base level, and then you'd put on the backpack, and then you'd put on the extra pouches, and they'd all clip together. Everybody did that to a degree, the Germans, the Americans, the British. And then you saw them augmented again in World War II. That idea of being able to drop a pack and still fight or go or do something and then go pick your pack up, that matters.
Yeah,
and even in a match environment, the ability to take that junk off just for a little while, for whatever reason, even going to the little blue shed, is a big deal.
Yeah, and the belt's really easy to do that with.
Click, take it off, click, put it back on, ready to go.
Yeah.
Really cool. Deviant, who's this guy?
I don't know. Somebody just used their real name.
I don't know, whatever. All right, we'll take the question anyway. What is it about handgun calibers that makes the projectiles ill-suited for being pointed Spitzer-type bullets? I see explanations ranging from velocity to the fact that feeding devices are often in the gun's grip. I would love a more comprehensive understanding.
I would say bore diameter.
Bore diameter.
The issue you have there is your handguns are typically starting at 9mm and going up. And if you were to have a Spitzer projectile that is stable, that has enough bearing surface in the barrel to not kind of do this going down, you're going to end up with a very heavy bullet. And so that's why you end up having more occasionally truncated cones and round-nosed sorts of things in handguns, is to balance the diameter that you need with the mass that is appropriate and the bearing surface on the barrel.
So it's a basis of the bearing surface to engage the rifling in the barrel based on the diameter of the bullet in general.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. You know, when you go back to the Old West, you'll see the original cap and ball guns were either round ball or Spitzer bullets. And the Spitzer bullets were significantly more heavy for the same reasons you're describing, thus decreasing the amount of powder capacity.
Yep.
So you turn into this, do I want a faster round ball or a slower Spitzer with more mass?
Yeah.
Now, the Russians have recently experimented with some Spitzer 9mm that they're calling AP.
Yeah, and I think I haven't done any serious investigation into that, but I think largely it is based on the AP
It may not.
nature. They're going to have a core in those things that's going to be something that's probably lighter than lead, and so that balances out some of your weight problem, because the inside of the bullet is not as heavy.
Yeah.
one of the other things, of course, that is a less important but still relevant factor is you don't really care about the external ballistics on a handgun round. With a rifle, what Spitzer really does is allow you to have a better long-range trajectory. We're talking several hundred yards and out, compared to the early round-nosed rifle bullets. With a pistol, nobody really cares about what the trajectory of your pistol round is at 400 yards.
Which is why you can see you doing things like wad cutters, even in a revolver,
right.
which I mean, it's literally a wall. It's the it's the boss of a bullet, right? It's just, there's no aerodynamics whatsoever, ballistic coefficient of crap.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter,
right? Because you're not shooting past 50 yards with that or whatever. Now, so the Spitzer provides you better ballistic coefficient. It could potentially provide you better penetration.
Yeah, but that's going to be more based on bullet material and.
But that's a good answer. I agree. So it's about bearing surface and bullet weight relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. Matthew J. Are bottlenecked high-velocity Spitzer bullets for pistols and PDWs, for example, the FN57 or HK's 4.6, a dead end, the future, or doomed to only be a niche application?
I'll take option C for $100.
The niche application?
Yes, doomed to be a niche application. They will never be a really popular civilian thing, I don't think, because they're entirely dependent on full auto. None of those bullets is going to be particularly lethal or effective by itself. They're all based on, well, I'm going to dump 4, 5, 6, 7 into a target in order to be effective. That's only going to happen in the military. So, civilian P90, PS90s, I think the MP7 was actually sold semi-auto in Canada.
I don't know. I saw
still, but I think at one point it was. That stuff, it'll always be a niche thing on the civilian market because it simply doesn't meet its original purpose.
I know I saw a photo fairly recently in one of these ridiculous European terrorist events. I thought it was Italy, actually. And there was some Carboneria or whatever, and they had an MP7 that was semi-auto only.
Okay.
And I looked at that picture, and someone made a comment, and I went, oh, man, 4.6 semi-auto only and this sounds bad.
That is almost certainly the result of the special, highly trained security forces have full auto ones, and they gave just the standard police dude
that's what it was.
Semi-auto because politics.
This is the one that's less scary.
Right.
But like 5.7, I've had a lot of experience with 5.7. 5.7 is not a terrible round. It is reasonably capable within its parameters, but when the 5.7 comes to its real magnificence, is in a full auto P90 guys.
Right.
With the proper bullet trajectory, proper bullets material manufacturing, so it has the AP capabilities.
Right.
And what you do is, if you're using it as a PDW or in a combative role, you pull the trigger and you give the guy 10 of them or 15 of them. And at that point, the terminal ballistics of a single round become irrelevant.
Think of it as a shotgun being restricted to one piece of buckshot at a time.
Oh, it's a good.
That makes it look like a pretty lame gun. But then, when you get the real shells full of 9 pellets of double-aught, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, this is actually remarkably effective.
I would agree. So I think niche application is the right answer, and some of these may be used for hunters on varminting or like little jackrabbits and stuff like that. But.
Yeah, and then in the military applications, even there, these are of limited utility. Because you're not going to give these to infantry. This is always kind of going to be a specialist, security service, personal protection detail, that sort of.
I will say, though, that a P90 and its full auto guys is a sweet, sweet little gun.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to have one.
It'd be if I could have one subgun, that'd be it. If I could get away with it, I would love to have one of those. Nick C. How does the ATF feel? Well, I don't know how the ATF feels. It's kind of mushy and weird, and they're inconsistent. But actually, they've been fairly consistent. How does the ATF feel about using a registered auto sear in a weapon that it has not been originally designed for? Well, it's a legal question, so we got to be careful here. We're not lawyers, nor do we play one on TV.
Nor would we even want to.
No, I mean, in general, I think it's okay.
So there are some issues regarding redesigning, but that's not usually sears. Yep. So generally, if you have a registered sear, that's going to be something like an AR-15 or an FNC or an HK sear.
Or like a lightning link, which is sort of a hack between the two.
Yeah, there are only a limited number of firearms for which that's a recognized and registered component. Typically, the registered component is the receiver itself. So in those cases where you have a registered sear, it's totally understood that you will take that and put it into a non-registered, a semi-auto only receiver, and it becomes a machine gun by virtue of the sear being the legally registered part.
But you can move it in and out. The sear is the machine gun.
Usually. Now they're like HKs, HK93s, 91s, MP5s. That whole family has some serious weird technicalities going on in that there are instances where, and I don't have all the details of this lined up properly in my head, but things like your shelf lowers and your pinned lowers. If you have a pin-on lower, you can get a pin-on registered lower, but if you don't have a registered upper, it's illegal to convert the upper to accept a pinned-on lower, because that turns the upper into a machine gun on its own as well. And so you can actually be in a situation where you can only make a full auto HK by having two registered components in conjunction.
Wow.
Right, but not always. There are some where, if you converted a non-pinned lower and registered it back before 86, that's legal to use with a normal semi-auto receiver. There's weirdness here. You can't just say, my lightning link is registered, therefore anything I do with it that results in a machine gun is legal. Because it may not be.
It's a sticky mess.
Yes.
So in general, in broad stroke generalities, a lightning link can go into any AR type thingy and you're probably okay.
Yes. The other interesting place where this can get a little bit weird is with like tube gun receivers. So for example, I looked into this. I had a parts kit for a Hotchkiss Universal. And holy cow, that would be awesome to have as a machine gun. And so one of the things I looked at was, would it be possible to buy a Sten tube? Because they're both basically just tube receivers. Well, can I buy a Sten tube registered and tweak it so it'll fit the trigger housing and the magazine well and the ejection port on my Hotchkiss Universal?
They're really weird about that.
And my understanding is, the answer is, you can only do that if the receiver remains capable of being used in its original guise. So that's where you can get things like a Sten tube built with a Sterling kit, because those parts all interchange. Or you can make the receiver so that it will accept Sterling parts or Sten parts. That's legally acceptable. In my case, with the Hotchkiss Universal, it would have required substantial modification that would have made the thing not functional as a Sten receiver, and thus that was not legal. So, this really goes all the way to, like, can I buy a Mac 10, cut the serial number plate off and weld it to a BAR, and now I have a legal BAR because it's got a registered machine gun serial number on it? The answer to that is a very clear no.
People did that and got away with that until they didn't.
Well, they got away with that until someone figured out what they were doing.
Right, they were turning cheap machine guns into more expensive, cool machine guns.
And now they're in jail.
Yes, they are. So the Sear thing on the Lightning Link isn't as bad as that. The Lightning Link is expected to be interchangeable into multiple firearms.
Right.
So in theory, that one probably, the HK one, as you already said, is kind of a quagmire.
Before you go and spend tens of thousands of dollars on a registered full auto thing, do your due diligence. Do more than looking at some stuff on YouTube.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is truly a legal quagmire, and you got to be very cautious.
Yeah.
So just because you buy a Sear, don't suddenly think all the guns in your safe are suddenly cool as machine guns now. Essentially. Adam G. Thoughts on the Mini 14/30 as a defensive or competition rifle?
I thought this makes me sad.
I don't really, why?
Well, just because I'd rather have an AK or an AR.
I don't know why you would go to, you're right, I don't know why you would go to a Mini 14 or a Mini 30 when you could get an AR or an AK, which in my opinion are more modular, better guns.
Yeah.
However, the Mini 14/Mini 30 is certainly a capable rifle.
Yeah.
And we've seen people use it very well at two-gun.
Figure out how accurate yours is. Some are good, some are less good.
Yeah.
And make sure you have magazines that run reliably.
My
That's the huge liability of the Mini is magazines.
My question would be, why would you do that when there are better options?
For pretty much the same price.
Yep. So figure out why. There might be some reason that's not obvious to the question, but
Yeah.
I don't quite understand.
Well, if you don't have a gun, and Grandpa,
Oh.
and you inherit from Grandpa a Mini 14 or a Mini 30, yeah, as long as it runs reliably with your mags and it's accurate enough for whatever you want to do with it.
They're not bad guns. They're generally reliable, and if you have an accurate one, you're good to go. It's just not very modular, and it's kind of held back into 1970 whatever.
Yeah.
But
Kind of like a Set-Me-L, made in America.
Otherwise-
With a totally different mechanism in every way.
yeah, boy, that's a good question. Mini 14 versus the Set-Me-L. Set-Me-L's a better gun.
Oh, I'd
combat gun.
totally take the Set-Me-L.
Yeah, I would too. Adam M. Do you think cartridges like the 50 Beowulf have any application in modern combat? Now, see, when you use the word any, you got a problem, because any is so broad That there's probably some reason somewhere.
However,
maybe some anti-material thing.
I'm willing to go out on a limb and just say no.
With the any being such a broad stroke, I'm going to say there's probably something somewhere. Someone's going to say yes.
Well, wasn't it the Coast Guard that actually bought some small numbers of 50 Beowulfs or 458 SOCOMs or something?
Maybe
because they wanted like a huge bullet to go through.
Well,
to use.
Remember, they still use 4570 as a line launcher.
That's true.
Now,
yeah.
So 4570 now that's not combat, but they're still using a 4570 base cartridge. Could 50 Beowulf have some application like that, or for some weird punching through a wall of a ship or something? Maybe. Like I said, anti-material, maybe. Remember the Desert Eagle to destroy the radiator or the engine block of the engine, that stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and go with you that in general, since any has, I'm going to put an asterisk next to any and say no, it has no application in modern combat. All right, this is one you're going to like. Oh, Stephen W. Regards to Ian's shell shot.
I liked it already.
LMG, have you considered that giving it its intended use as a fire suppression assault weapon, that its inaccuracy is not a fault, but rather a design feature? I smell Lindy Beige. After all, firing from the waist is not exactly a precision aiming technique. Instead, walking fire is what he's referring to. So the question is there a time and place, maybe with a shell shot or any other gun, in which inaccuracy is actually an advantage?
No.
No. 0% no.
Inaccuracy is never an advantage.
100%. Why would you ever want a gun to be inaccurate?
Not the Bren gun. That's what a lot of people are going to immediately react with, I think. Mm-hmm. First off, the Bren gun was not so accurate that it was an ineffective machine gun. That's just utterly not true on the face of it. The problem, what you actually have is the Shosha's inability to really give you accurate fire, which is, I don't think it's really a mechanical feature. I think it's really just a practical feature of the amount of bolt that's flying.
It's the nature of 10 pounds of open bolt flying back and forth every time you pull the trigger.
Exactly. I think, now, I don't know for sure, but I suspect if you clamp one of those things in some sort of ransom rest, it would shoot just fine. It'd be totally serviceably accurate. But it's very difficult without a whole lot of practice to actually get that as a person. That's not a feature, that is a limitation. That's why it was restricted to like the 200-yard and in roll that it was. Had it been more suitable for precision fire, it would have been a far more useful gun, and it would have been pushed into bigger and better and more expansive rolls. So
that's an interesting video in the future, is that when you get your show shot going, to actually lock that thing down to a point where it's so rigidly mounted that it can't move and see what it can do.
Yeah.
But that said, now there are things like there were machine gun mounts and such that had beat zones, and they would actually intentionally move left and right,
yes.
Or they would bounce on their mount to do certain things to increase a beat zone, which
yes.
is in theory increasing the inaccuracy of the gun. However, that had a purpose. The gun itself should have been and as capable of as much accuracy as humanly possible, and there are certain instances in which you wanted to be able to spray fire into a controlled area to control a zone, but that's not inaccuracy as a benefit.
Right. That is typically done, or was typically done, to deny the enemy access to using an area. So it would be, there's a crossroad 1,000 yards away over there, and we know that all the German field kitchens are going to go through it in order to get to the troops to serve them dinner tonight. So let's get a couple of Vickers guns and just put a continuous slow fire on that crossroads so that they can't go through it. So they have to figure out something else, and maybe we'll hurt the troops' morale. We'll just mess up their logistics that way. It wasn't like we're going to wait till all the field kitchens are right there and then we're going to try and snipe them all.
So what I'm saying is the idea of a beat zone is not something that's based on the inaccuracy of a gun. A beat zone can be done with an accurate gun, and all things considered, you want an accurate gun, and you can put a beat zone into it should you need it.
Inaccuracy is always a bug and not a feature.
Fair enough. And by the way, no offense to Lindy Beige, I just disagree with him in this particular regard. Scott G. Do you believe the 1911 platform, in the world of polymer double stacks, is still a viable weapons platform, be it for self-defense, law enforcement, military use?
We'll call it obsolescent.
It's obsolescent.
It's not necessarily obsolete. It's not fundamentally worse than any other pistol. It's just substantially limited in capacity, weight, etc.
It's as viable as a weapon that's based on an obsolete cartridge can be?
It's no less viable than the M14.
No, I would say it's more so. I'd say it's more unviable. I would say it's less viable than an M14 even. I mean, when you start bringing in 45 ACP and 7 rounds or 7+1 capacity, you are, in pistol land, you're pretty behind the curve.
That's true.
If you're going, I mean, the M14 is not a fantastic rifle, as you know, but you got a 20 round mag and you got 308, which has some some reason.
Okay.
If you're kicking in a door and you've got a 1911 in your hand and the guy on the other side of the wall has a 19 plus 1.9mm, you got a problem.
I think the 1911 has brought about a substantial school of thought in precision accuracy and shot placement, and it's maybe just to continue from the last question, limited capacity is never a feature. It's something that you can work around.
Neither is recoil.
It's not right.
No.
None of these things are good on the face of it. You'd rather have infinite capacity and zero recoil.
It's as viable as limited capacity and more recoil can be.
Yeah.
If you were going to design a pistol now or have to go into combat with a pistol, I don't think you'd pick the one that held 1/3 the rounds and recoiled more.
Would you pick a 7-round 38 or 357?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty similar.
It is. And the whole 45 ACP9 that's done and hashed, we know that's not a moot point.
Yeah.
So could you push it into service? Yes. Should you be? No, and I would question anyone still doing that.
Yeah.
All right, this one's, Molly's asked this a number of times, and we got to get this one done. I wanted to do a whole video on it, but let's get the question answered here. Maybe we'll do a video in the future. What are the practical and technical differences between a red dot sight, a reflex sight, a holographic sight, and a prismatic sight? Well, a red dot and a reflex are very close to the same thing, in my opinion. Now, some people would refer to a reflex sight as like the early Trigicons that had like a lens and they used it and reflecting on it. You know what I'm talking about?
Not really.
Okay, never mind. Let's just go red dot, holographic, and prismatic, because those are the most quintessential ones. A red dot is a tube, typically speaking, with a mirror system and some sort of LED that projects that dot into a piece of lens between you as you look through it.
Okay.
A holographic sight is a piece of glass that uses a laser that projects the laser image onto a piece of glass.
Okay.
And a prismatic is a scope that has lenses in it, much like a traditional scope, usually with an etched reticle.
Okay. So no projected dot.
Right. There might be some sort of illumination, some sort of like, but it's not projected. It's etched into a reticle. Or there's even a filament in between you and that, but that's a whole other thing.
So not really much difference between holographic and red dot.
Not a lot. The differences are that red dot sights use a mirror and an LED, typically not a laser, and therefore have to have coated lenses, and therefore the amount of light transmission through a red dot is less than through a holographic sight like an EOTech.
Okay.
So an EOTech has a laser, and it has just pretty much a piece of glass. There's no real coatings or things going on there in terms of light transmission. Holographics typically also have a larger surface area or a larger lens to look through, so therefore it's not constrained to a tube, whether it's a regular aim point or a mini. And by the way, that comes into play when you start using night vision. When you put a PVS-14 behind a red dot, if it's a small tube or a bigger tube, some of those coatings and such provide less light transmission. And remember, a PVS-14 is enhancing the ambient IR light that's available.
Right.
And if that's being obstructed by the lens or the filtering of the coatings in the lenses, then you get less light transmission. And so therefore, a PVS-14 behind some red dots will have a dimmer light amplification than behind an EOTech.
More noticeable where you don't maybe notice it at all in full daylight.
Correct. So that's why EOTech, being controversial or not, when you put a PVS-14 behind a holographic sight like an EOTech and you turn that thing on, it's awesome because you lose none of the capabilities of the light amplification of the night vision, but you still have this awesome reticle.
Okay.
But when you put it behind an aim point, you have some light transmission issues.
Okay.
One benefit of the red dot and holographic is they have zero issues with eye relief.
Right.
You just look through them. It's just a dot. It's like a heads-up display. There's a dot before you with no lenses in between you and that are changing anything. A prismatic, however, since it is an optical system that has lenses in it, does have eye relief.
However, the benefit there is if you have an eye condition like astigmatism, you can use a prismatic sight where you might not be able to use a red dot.
Neither you nor I have an astigmatism, so to us, red dots and holographic sights, it's hard to understand what people that have that problem are seeing.
Yeah.
They tell me it looks like big old star bursts and stuff. I don't have this. I mean, if you turn it up way too bright, you get this kind of burst anyway.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's what it looks like all the time. I don't know. But since we don't have that problem, I can't speak to that, but I do know that people who have astigmatism have told me that a prismatic sight, and this makes sense because it's a different optical system, since you're looking at an etched reticle or something like that, that works for them.
Yeah.
But it has eye relief. So you lose that benefit of coming up or being off. That thing that a red dot or holographic sight really brings to the table in spades, prismatic sights don't bring that as well.
Okay.
Kind of like looking through a 1x
Right.
variable.
That's kind of what they are. It's a 1x variable that just doesn't change from 1x.
It's not a true statement, but you could call it a 1x.
Okay.
Yeah. Not the best answer, but how's that for now? James H. For those of us with an astigmatism using red dots into blurry messes, are there any options for zero eye relief sites worth trying? I've asked, but the answer is no. I'm happy to hear here rather than have you put it in a video. Kind of just answered that, James. No, not really. A prismatic would be probably your best bet. That still has an eye relief requirement, although a minimal one compared to some optics. So I would say go with a prismatic.
Seal? Good for some things.
Maybe.
It's not a direct stand-in for a red dot.
That's a hard call.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I don't know, since I don't have an astigmatism, is things like, for example, I did the review we talked about earlier in the video, the Russian Obzor.
Yeah.
I wonder if that works.
I have no idea.
It's not exactly a projection. It's kind of a reflection. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be.
James, I don't have a great answer for you. I would look at some of the earlier Trigicon sites. Maybe look, if you could ever get your hands on one of those Obzors, look through that, see if that looks right to you.
Sounds to me like a good opportunity to go to a big gun show and play with lots of optics.
Because there are some sighting systems, for example, Trigicon, like even the AcuPoint that we're doing a review of. It doesn't have an illuminated reticle based on some electro-optical thing. It's
Right.
an etched thing that's that's lit by ambient light or tritium.
Right.
That could be worth looking into. It's not the 1x because that has eye relief, but things like the Obzor or some of the Trigicon equivalents do the same thing where they project a dot or a reticle onto glass, but it's not done electrically, it's just done with ambient light. I wonder if an astigmatism works better with that. I don't know.
James, you should find out and then let us know.
I'm really curious actually, but that would be my recommendation, is a prismatic, which does have eye relief, or look into something like the Obzor or equivalent there from Trigicon and see if those work for you. Seth N. What are your experiences with red dot versus holographics? I know that I would like to know your personal insights on whether the pretty things in the sight picture are worth the cost of battery life. So we're talking EOTech versus red dot here is what we're talking essentially. You know what, Seth? You don't necessarily have to go with an EOTech anymore to get a 65 MOA cool, pretty thing in the sight picture. You can do that with some red dot systems now.
Like the Holosun.
The Holosun I'm running on our Wobble Stoner 2 gun, which is the 503C, I think.
Yes.
That one has an EOTech style 65 MOA reticle in it, and it is not a holographic sight.
And it's got like a 30,000 hour battery life. And it'll run without a battery if you're outside because it's got a solar panel.
So I would say the Holosun we're using in the Wobble Stoner 2 project is absolutely the equivalent of an EOTech in terms of the reticle and that cool sight picture. What it does not bring to the table, which I mentioned earlier, is it does not have as good the light transmission that you would get through an EOTech, and therefore if you're going to use it for night vision, the EOTech still has a benefit.
Yeah.
But other than the benefit of light transmission, you can get that cool reticle now in other optic or other sighting systems besides EOTech, so you don't necessarily need to have the battery life cost of an EOTech that's laser powered anymore.
Yeah.
So EOTech, I know that they're doing some new products. I'm not trying to bag on them, but that cool sight picture that they brought to the table is now capable in other ways, and they need to find they need to change their market in a way because their product is no longer all that relevant.
We've talked about this before. There are some of these optics companies that get many huge international contracts for optical systems, and that kind of slows down their development.
Yeah, it does. Well, I brought that up. Well, we're going to have a Holosun video in the What Was Studio project, which is not out yet. But when you look at people, and they make great products, Aimpoint and EOTech included, EOTech's had some issues, but Aimpoint, let's use Aimpoint as an example, because no one has any beef with Aimpoint.
Yeah.
They have made a consistently fantastic product for a long time now, since the early 80s, right? Mm-hmm. The very first ones, which were archaic by now.
Excellent.
But when you look at what an Aimpoint did in 1980X and what an Aimpoint does today, with the exception of battery life and maybe tube size, they're functionally identical in terms of having a red dot in front of you.
Yeah.
They've not done anything that's like kind of really
pushing the envelope.
Yeah, like you have to start looking at vendors, including Holosun, Chinese-made stuff, mm-hmm. to start seeing people try to differentiate themselves in the market by designing and doing different things. Because Aimpoint can keep making the new Aimpoint X that now has better battery life, uses a different battery, and can be submerged to the depths of the Titanic. But otherwise, it's still an Aimpoint with a dot. Like it doesn't do anything different than the other Aimpoint before it, except for those three things. When you see the Holosun, it's got a solar panel, it's got battery recharge, it's got an auto-adjust brightness. There's things going on there, and I'm not saying just Holosun, others do this too, but you got to look away from some of the big names to start finding some attempt to diversify the marketplace.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you get a huge military contract and it kind of tends to focus you on serving that.
Yep.
And those big military contracts are often not really interested in substantial change. They want the thing that works, that we're very confident in, not the experimental thing that might seem great and then fail on us in the field.
My point is you could take a very old ML2 aim point now, while it takes a weird battery, and it's a bigger tube, put it on your gun, and it is just as good as any modern aim point in terms of, as long as you've got a battery in it and it's functional,
Yeah.
who cares? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Really. And in some instances, we've seen the dots go from 4 MOA to 1 MOA. And I think the 4 MOA was actually preferable. You can use it better for range finding, and sometimes that dot being bigger is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, next one. Derek M. This is some future content questions. Is the lever action alternative history series still on the horizon, or are there other projects that come first? That's timely.
Yes, it is still on the hopefully it's getting closer than the horizon.
It's actually the next one.
Hopefully it's like just over the hill.
It's the next major project.
Yeah.
So the What Would Stoner Do project is coming to conclusion with the end of the end of the Tiger Valley match.
Mm-hmm.
We still have videos coming out through December about some of the components that we used in the build.
Yep.
And we'll have an ultimate conclusion video. But that's the end of the What Would Stoner, not the end, but it's the end of the What Would Stoner Do project. You'll still see updates on it from time to time, but it's the end of the project as a major initiative. And the next project we're taking up in 2018 is the What If lever gun thing.
Yep.
So those gears are turning now, and you're going to start seeing that content in 2018.
Yeah.
Early 2018.
Those are going to be cool.
Let me use a corporate term. Q1 2018.
God, don't set delivery dates.
Q1 is fair. We can get away with Q1.
That's what they all say.
All right. We'll get away with Q1. Sean A. Are we going to be getting any new Old West vignettes in the near future?
Definitely. We actually just recorded one not that long ago.
Also very timely. Just finished editing it, and it's up. So
Cool.
I don't know in the next couple weeks. Yes. It will be up in December. How's that? There will be a new one in December. Cody S. That one I can confirm because it's up and uploaded and ready to go. Cody S.
Have we not learned anything from anybody in that we're actually setting firm timetables that we're trying to guarantee?
Q1 for lever guns and an Old West vignette in December. We'll meet these. All right. Cody S. Is InRange enlarged? I like InRange in part because of you, the presenters. What sort of non-firearms related hobbies do you have or have you previously had?
No, you want to start that one or you want me to?
You go for it first.
Well, I don't have a lot of active hobbies because I'm kind of embroiled in a lot of gun-related stuff between InRange and Forgotten Weapons and writing a book at the moment. Before I was this deep into it, I did have a fair variety of hobbies. I built and am still slowly working on building an off-grid house. I was into homebrewing. I did mead. I did mostly mead, actually. Never really did beer because I'm not much of a beer drinker. But I would love to do some winemaking as well at some point. With the appropriate licenses, I'd love to do some home distilling too. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be cool.
You played the bagpipes for like 10 years, although I'm really rusty on that now.
How long has it been?
Since I played seriously, 15 years.
Yeah.
A couple of years since I was noodling around with it.
Sure.
Were there others beyond that? I dabbled in car mechanics until I realized that I just don't like car mechanics at all. Bad.
You did learn that.
Yeah.
I know I was around you with that one.
Yeah. In fact, there are some old videos I have up about my Jeep. I had a 1948 Jeep.
The one you used to have.
Yes.
Proof that you don't want to do that anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's most of the big stuff for me. What about you?
Yeah, you know what? I think you've seen quite a bit of it on the channel already. Quite honestly, InRange being somewhat diverse in terms of its content distribution. The Old West stuff. I love Old West history. I love history in general. Old West history is probably my number one passion of historical pursuits. Partially because of where I live. I can actually go to places here and go see them. I can read this and go, I'm going to go find that and go find the site, which is really cool.
And usually within an hour or two drive.
Sometimes.
Not that far away.
Some of it's more effort than others. But when you go out to a place in the middle of the desert that really no one visits and you find, as in our old KH Butte video, actual battle emplacements from the battle still there in the desert, that brings history to life.
Yeah, it's really cool in a way that you often don't get, like on the East Coast.
And watch for our next Old West vignette because it's got some of that in it. But going to places, and Europeans obviously have a lot of that. They can go out and go see a World War I battlefield. Well, some of them can. Or other things of that ilk.
Yeah.
But the Old West stuff's really cool. I find it a fascinating time in history. and culturally interesting as well. So I would say that ghost towns, which are related to that, I like going to old ruinous places that used to be a thing and aren't anymore. To me, it's a reminder of our place in the universe, that this was a bustling city. It is now that. Like, that will change. Some of what we think of today as being permanent isn't. And that's a good reminder of where things are. Did dabble in music here and there. In fact, there was a video a long time ago on InRange of me playing around with a hurdy-gurdy, which is a weird Renaissance era instrument. I still mess with that. Obviously, digital stuff, security rights, computer stuff. I've always been into that. I read quite a bit. Philosophy, I kind of like philosophy, and history again. So that's a mix.
We don't want to give away all our secrets.
No, but that's, I mean, and a lot of that you've seen on the channel, because it's, so it's probably not a surprise.
Yeah, my personal hobbies don't really come into play with Forgotten Weapons.
No, well, it's a much more focused channel. InRange is diverse in terms of its approach.
Yeah.
So, but can't think of anything else, really. That's good enough for now.
Okay.
Yep. Karl V, short question. AKs in 223, are they a viable alternative considering the lack of access to 545?
There's a lack of access to 545?
You know, I hear that a lot, and I think that comes from the idea that you can't just go buy it at the local store. Like, you can't even go to some warehouse or some sort of regular sporting goods store and buy 545 very commonly.
You buy ammo at a local store?
I agree with you.
This just gets weirder and weirder.
I can't think. I'm sure I have, and I do occasionally for whatever. If I need a one-off box of something, I'll go to a local store and pay their exorbitant price and buy the box. But I don't buy ammunition except in bulk online.
Yeah, me too.
And as a result, 545 is not hard to obtain.
It's not expensive either.
Now, if you're talking about cool Gucci Milsurp poison bullets, yeah, all right, fine.
That's gotten a little harder to find.
But you don't need that. You can get the 60 grain Tula or Wolf or Brown Bear or Silver Bear or Golden Bear or Titanium Bear or whatever. And all that stuff's interchangeable and works just fine.
Yep.
And so 545 isn't hard to get. Now, if you want a diversity of particular projectile types, 545 becomes more daunting.
You're not doing that in 545.
556 has got everything under the sun from 1 grain to 5 million grains. So
yeah. And I think the reason that Karl is asking this is because, historically speaking, and I remember this from old forums, it's like, well, you had an AR in 556 or your AK in 545 or 762, and any other combination was some sort of inbreeding heresy.
Evil.
Well, you know what? Actually, the Russians are making 556 AKs. The Poles and the Bulgarians, I believe, have both adopted them as a standard military weapon.
Yep.
The Galil is, of course, a 556 AK. The Velmat was not used by the Finnish military in 556, but they did sell them commercially. There is absolutely no problem with 556 in an AK.
I don't understand why people feel that way. So first of all, 545 is not as unobtainium as you're making it sound. You can get it online. Now, if you don't like the idea of not being able to go to Walmart and get it, okay, fine. 556 in an AK, back in the day when there was some weird hacky ones that had bad mags and stuff, okay, yeah, it's problematic. But you get a 556 Arsenal or any other modern AK chambered in that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. They're just as reliable and fantastic as a 545.
Yep.
Now, I happen to like 545 as a cartridge. It has a more diminutive recoil impulse, and it's easier to carry lots of it because it just weighs less. Mm-hmm. But a 556 AK, of which I do have one, and it's actually a short barrel one.
And you've used it in matches. I've shot it. It's a great little rifle.
It's actually my favorite rifle. If all my guns ever be, that one gun is my favorite gun.
My favorite AK myself is my 556 Velmat.
So I would absolutely not hesitate about getting a 556 AK, and the Bulgarian Circle 10 mags work fantastically. So there is not an issue at all, in my opinion.
That's cool. You got to give someone good news.
Good news. Ian S. Do non-wipe suppressors wear out with use? Is there a difference in lifespan on rifle suppressors or pistol suppressors?
I don't know that they really wear out.
They don't really. I mean, you have
fill them up with crap, especially 22s.
You have to clean them over time. Yep. 22 LR suppressors will carbon foul to the point where they will fill up with carbon material. And a regular suppressor can too as well in theory over time. 22s are more, have a proclivity towards it.
Yeah.
But they don't really wear out. As long as you're not getting baffle strikes, you're actually doing physical damage to the thing. A suppressor should last you as long as you're willing to use it and maintain it.
I think you will get some issues, especially on short-barreled guns with high pressure, where you'll actually, it's basically the equivalent of throat erosion, but on the suppressor. You will burn up the baffles right at the muzzle.
Like Gemtech has a specific warranty thing about putting it on a gun with a barrel shorter than 10.5 inches.
Yeah.
The blast chamber and fire erosion that occurs as a result will cause trouble over time. You can erode it, and a suppressor over time, if it gets filled with junk or there's fire erosion, may not suppress as well as it did when it was a fresh, brand new one. But it doesn't mean that it's ruined. It's just maybe not as effective as it was. Yeah. So, and is there a difference in lifespan between rifle and pistol?
I'm going to assume pistols will last longer, just because you've got less of that erosion.
Yeah, I would agree.
This is where you get issues of what material is your suppressor being made out of. Do you want to spend the extra for Inconel or titanium? Because it will last longer before you lose that, percentages of effectiveness. And also for suppressors that can be disassembled. You're going to pay more to have one that can be unthreaded and pulled apart and you can replace parts or clean it. It's going to be cheaper if you get one that's just welded together and they don't have to deal with all that extra machining, but then you don't have access to the internals.
Well, so I actually have some real world examples of this. I have 3 in theory. I have a Gemtech Halo, which is built it is built for military specifications for fully automatic fire on a 249, welded together. I mean, you could beat someone to death with the suppressor alone. That thing will last me my lifetime plus more, unless something bad happens to it. It's just, that's what it's meant to be. It's this durable, ridiculous tank-like suppressor. I have a lightweight one that came with that I use on my Mac, M11A1. That one will last, in theory, forever, although it's an aluminum tube, an aluminum system. But because it's pistol, not such a big deal.
Okay.
And then I had an aluminum tube one from Red Jacket Firearms back in the day. Back in the day when you could not, there was a day, not long ago, when you would ask the question, I'd like to suppress an AK, and they go, what are you, an idiot? Get out of my booth.
You can't do that. It's not physically possible.
This is before all the debacle happened with Red Jacket. This is way back.
This is before they had a TV
This is before
show.
they even had a show. It is before they had a TV show. Someone led me to them, and I asked them, I go, will you guys make a can for an AK? And they're like, sure. And they just make the hole bigger so that you don't have a problem with baffle strike. And they sent me the can, and I used it for years until the aluminum tube fire eroded, and one day I fired it, and half the tube went downrange. It didn't have a baffle strike, it just eroded in one spot because it was an aluminum tube, and eventually, bye-bye. And I kept the tube, and it's sitting in my safe as this destroyed item because I can't get it repaired, but I don't want to throw it away because it's technically an NFA item. So it just sits there in this broken state.
You can, I think, surrender it or write to ATF.
I should just tell them this thing is gone and get rid of it, so I don't have to hold on to this stupid piece of metal. But so the Halo will last forever. The Mac one will last, in theory, forever because it's pistol, and unless something goes wrong. But the aluminum one from Red Jacket did eventually die. So
So they do wear out.
they can, and the material used matters.
I wouldn't go with aluminum. I think I'd want steel.
I don't know why. Yeah. Oh well, it is what it is. Kyle C, in your opinion, if the Browning automatic rifle had been kept at the M1918 standard, lightened and rechambered into 7.62 NATO, otherwise 308, would it have been a better option than the M14 during the Vietnam War?
No.
No, it wouldn't have been.
No, it's still 16 pounds.
As good as not good as the M14 turned out to be, it's better than a BAR.
Yeah.
And you don't want full auto.
You think M14 mag changes are slow. Wait till you try BAR mag changes.
It's true. So, no, sorry. Mitchell C. Oh, go ahead.
Might have been better than the M15.
Please, what?
The M15 was the squad automatic version of the M14.
Oh, yeah.
That never went past basically
When
trials.
you said that, I didn't think of the term, but okay, fair enough. Yes, I could agree with that.
That would be where you maybe have an argument.
What about the monitor?
So the monitor kind of takes it back. The monitor is absolutely an automatic rifle.
You were pretty enamored with it, though.
It's cool,
Yeah.
but it's not a light machine gun. Yeah. They deliberately got away from that by having a shorter and lighter profile barrel. They got rid of the bipod.
Yeah, but we're comparing it to the M14. So the monitor in 308, I mean, we're in theoretical land here.
If I had to stick with a BAR, it would be the monitor that I'd want.
Right.
But I'd still say the M14 is a more practical rifle.
Okay.
Mag changes the weight and the handling.
Weight alone.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It'd be in full auto fire. That monitor's probably better than an M14.
Yeah, but the M14 should have never been full auto in the first place.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Okay. Mitchell C. As a follow-up to your answer on the AK question last month, what are your thoughts on the new Galil in 5.56, and what are your thoughts on AK pistols being SBR'd or braced?
All right, so two very distinct questions.
They are.
The Galil Ace in 5.56. What do you think?
I would rather have a Bulgarian arsenal gun. It's just something I'm used to.
Okay.
The Galil Ace is, I don't, what are they going for now in price?
I have no idea. I haven't looked.
I'm not opposed to them. I haven't had any time to handle one. I did handle one at SHOT Show 2 years ago, and a piece fell off of it when I picked it up off the rack. That doesn't mean it's a bad gun. SHOT Show abuses everything.
And that was a piece of their little spring-loaded dust covery sort of thing.
Yeah. I honestly, I'm not like dying to get my hands on a Galil Ace, but I wouldn't mind playing with one. I think there's a potential there. There's a
strong recommendation.
No, there's a potential there.
Okay.
Now I have an arsenal gun at 5.56 as I mentioned earlier, and I've shot a bunch of Bulgarian 5.56 guns, and they're great. You have your Valmet, which is great. There's no reason the Ace couldn't be great.
Yeah.
I don't know what mags it uses. Do you?
I thought it's Stanag.
Oh, that's
I
smart.
thought they're AR mags.
I haven't really paid a lot of attention.
To me, being not of military vintage, it's just less interesting to me.
No, well,
That's not because it's bad.
Yeah.
That's just my personal interest runs more towards the military lineage. If you gave me the option right now of an IMI Galil in its original 1970s form or a Galil Ace, I would take the one from the 70s without any real hard consideration.
yeah. See, I would not. If someone's watching this would like to provide a Galil Ace in 5.56, I'd be glad to run one through a 2-gun match. I think it'd be an interesting gun to try out.
We'll mud test it too, see if that new dust cover is better than the old stuff.
I'm not so compelled that I want to go buy one. That's the problem. But if we could get our hands on one to play with, I would be on board.
As far as buying one and owning it, I think to me this comes down to the classic question of, okay, it's a semi-auto military pattern 5.56 rifle. In what way is it better than an AR-15 or specifically our Stoner rifles?
It's not going to be.
And the answer is it's going to be like between 90 and 98% as good at everything, which means it's between 2 and 10% worse at everything or at some things. So why?
Well, I mean, as they got to bring different products to the market to sell them. I get that. But in terms of practical application, I would love to try to use one. I'd like to find out what it's like to use one.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to spend the money to buy one because we already have what was Stoner guns and other ARs laying around, or even Bulgarian AKs and 5.56.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that compelling about the Ace that makes me go, golly gee, I got to get that too.
Yeah.
If I were going to go buy one, I didn't have one yet, then I would think that the Ace is definitely worth looking at closely.
Okay.
But I don't have any experience with it to say if it's good or not. In terms of SBR braced, that's a legal question.
Yeah. As a guy who's on video, I'm not planning to really mess with braces because I don't want to be that guy if they decide to change those rulings. I recognize, in private life, that's really a whole different story because those things are totally accepted as totally legal. Nothing wrong with them. And if the rules change at some point, it's not a problem to change with the rules.
I'd say never mind the rules, the thing I would say is an SBR one allows you to have an actual stock instead of that crap.
Yeah. The downside is, with an SBR, in fact, I think the biggest downside is with an SBR, it gets tricky to transport it.
Which sucks. It's interesting that in theory, you get a brace and you have sort of a craptastic stock, but now you can travel between New Mexico and Arizona without a problem.
Some people may not realize that. If you have an NFA item and you travel interstate with it, you actually have to file paperwork ahead of time to get permission. Well, that's sort of permission. It's basically notification of ATF that you're transporting it interstate.
But I have a legitimate SBR AK that I love. It's actually, I said it earlier, it's my favorite rifle. Out of all my guns, it's my favorite gun just because I like it. That one's a problem because it stays in Arizona.
Yeah.
If I want to go up to Utah with it, it's like, there's I have to go file this stupid form or whatever.
Waiting on the NFA transfer and paying the tax are less annoying than that. So they're one-time things and then they're done.
I guess I'm going to say that's a question for you to decide for yourself.
Yeah.
Fabian H. And this question has been, I know you've asked this many times, and the reason I didn't take it is because I don't have an answer, and I don't know that we have one now.
So, go ahead and read the question.
What are your thoughts on the Shell Shock Technologies 2-piece cases? And I don't know I honestly didn't even know what it was until I went to Google it and looked at it, and that's why I hadn't taken the question in the past, and I Googled it again today, and I looked at the website again today, and I got to tell you, my gut instinct is I looked at it, read the website, looked at it again, and you did it too.
I think this is a product designed to separate you from your money.
Here's the thing. You said, I was wondering what you thought, because I'm like, Ian wasn't that familiar with it. He's like, let me Google this before we, look at the question. And he looked at it, and he scrolls it, and I'm like, and I could tell he's scrolling through the page, and he's like, what does this do? And I'm like, I don't know. and I
Okay, so there are going to be a lot of people watching this who, like us, have no clue what Shell Shock Technologies two-part cases are.
Yeah.
It's a 9mm pistol cartridge case that appears to have an aluminum base and a stainless steel upper cylinder body. And the website has various rationalizations for this, like the aluminum base. Now, they say it's stronger, less likely to burst with an unsupported chamber, which sounds like grade A baloney to me. They say it's less wear on the extractor and the breech face, which is
who cares?
Like,
Not
technically true, but who cares? They try to claim that the stainless steel upper piece is less abrasive than brass. Like, what they're touting is that it's reloadable and you can use any bullets with it, which sounds to me like brass cases. Their price is like 10 cents a case. So,
you know what? We might not be the right people, because like I would take my premium AR-15 and someone will throw a bunch of tool at me. I'm like, cool, and I'll jam it in there and not care. Some people would be like, sacrilege, you're destroying your extractor, you're breaking your ejector, your chamber's being scratched. And I'm like, that's a bimetal bullet, your barrel's gonna wear out. I'm like, bang, cool. Like, I just don't care. Yeah.
The most expensive rifle I have is my FAMAS, which is specifically designed for steel.
Which we just shot a ton of steel case bimetal bullets.
The French military uses steel cased ammo because it's a delayed blowback action, and that's what it's optimized for. This stuff, if you want to know where the future developments of non-brass cartridge cases are, they're going to be either all polymer or hybrid brass and polymer. The U.S. military is already using this stuff in 50 BMG ammo because what it actually legitimately offers is a substantial weight reduction. And especially for 50 cal ammo, where you've got a lot of brass in that stuff, and when you're putting it on things like little Kiowa helicopters, reducing the weight of the ammo really does make a non-trivial difference. This stuff, hybrid steel, aluminum case,
magic stuff.
It's great for separating you from your
It's made with love. Maybe it's made with love.
Love for your money.
Love.
That they want to have.
I don't know enough. Maybe there's something special about this thing that we're not aware of, but our glance at the website, plus all of its really marketing pictures with misspelled words on it, made me question it immediately.
We'll go talk to them at SHOT Show. It'll be fantastic.
Interesting.
I'm sure they'll be able to justify
on that note, last SHOT Show we talked about some of that poly case stuff, which are those polymer bullets.
Yeah.
Some of that showed up at the local store. I saw it. I'm like, clunk, and I bought a couple boxes of it, because now finally we'll get to shoot some of that stuff. We'll do something with it on video. Some of it's frangible, which means we can scare people, and I'll shoot some steel from like a foot away and just terrify the internet. And then maybe we can also test it on something else. But I finally have some of that.
All right. Well,
but we should talk to them at SHOT Show, because I'd be curious to hear what that does. The first glance at the website kind of flagged my woo alert, and it felt really iffy. Yeah.
All right.
Pavel S. If you were forced to fight in a real Rattenkrieg type urban battle, something like Stalingrad or Grozny, what firearm would you bring? What one firearm would you bring? Would you choose your what was done to do rifles, a different rifle, or something else like a shotgun or an LMG?
Tank? You probably don't want a tank. People are gonna like.
I would choose the plane that I would get on that would take me out of Stalingrad and Grozny, which, by the way, the Germans tried when they were hanging out to the friggin' landing structure of wings of planes trying to get out of Stalingrad.
Yeah.
But what would you choose?
I'd take my stoner rifle.
Yeah, me too. I look at all these guns, and we look at all the. I mentioned two guns already today that I like a lot. I love the What Would Stoner Do build when we're done with it. I really like my short AK. Either one of those I'd be happy with. But yeah, I would take the most effective thing I have, and the most effective thing I have is the What Would Stoner Do build.
Yep, it's good over a wide variety. When I was reading this, I'm like, well, maybe it's some sort of submachine gun, maybe. But then the thing is, I don't know what I'm going to run into. Maybe I'll want to make a precise shot somewhere.
Or you're shooting down a street that could be 150, 200 yards.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the Stoners, was a general purpose rifle. I like it.
And I know that it sounds, we're not promoting these because we don't sell them, but the project really did manifest in a way that the end result is it came out better than I expected it to.
Yeah.
They really are fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what would Stoner do? We got 2 InfoSec ones, which I think you can chime in on, and then that is actually the end of this.
All right.
Sam W. I know very little about the current net neutrality debate, and I've heard compelling arguments in either way. In your opinion, what is the best argument against net neutrality, and why is it wrong? Is it possible for a digital Bill of Rights to deal with this issue in a more nuanced way? That's enough of the question.
Yeah. That's a very perceptive way to frame the question.
It is.
What side are you on, and what's the other side's best argument?
Yeah.
What is the best argument against net neutrality?
Well, I think people conflagrate a couple things. They think that there are 2 things that I see from the anti-net neutrality side of the debate. And one is that there are some people that are so opposed to any form of government regulation in any form or any guise that they see it as a evil.
Yeah, but that's not an argument. That's a knee-jerk reaction.
Well, it's a constant.
But it has no actual justification.
Well,
I understand that. Anything the government wants, I'm automatically against. Or anything the government would do, I'm automatically
There's a lot of
against. There is a lot of that. But realistically, that's not a rational argument.
Well, okay, there are instances in which regulation has definitely caused market problems. Okay, so
Absolutely.
And the 2015 FCC Open Internet Act is not the one that did that. That act requires all bits on the internet and all data on the internet to be treated equally.
Okay.
That, in my opinion, is not something that could accidentally form a monopoly. There were other regulations that happened way before that are beyond the scope of this question that may have induced some of the monopolistic problems we see with the internet infrastructure.
Okay.
Fair. Fine. Maybe the government did cause a problem there. That's another discussion. The reality that we live in the world we live in today is that there is an oligarchy of internet backbone providers, and generally speaking, very few selections for an ISP to connect to the internet with. 1 or 2 or 3 at the most at your house.
Yeah.
And of those 3, one of them is high speed and the other 2 are garbage.
Yeah.
So you really have 1. And so whether or not those previous situations caused this situation to exist is actually unfortunately not relevant in the current debate about whether or not you would want to allow these ISPs to actually charge tiered data plans or manipulate the data in a way that they prioritize old mass media or Netflix or YouTube over an independent third party because of net neutrality being eliminated.
So if I could take a shot at what is the best argument against net neutrality, I think it would be without net neutrality, you theoretically open up the opportunity for ISPs to experiment with better ways, more efficient ways to balance bandwidth uses.
I would agree with that.
And if that works out in the way that anti-net neutrality people want it to, yeah, you could end up with a better balanced internet where the things that have to go fast are able to, and the things that don't have to go fast don't need to. I think the reason that argument is faulty is that there's no accommodation for the profit motive in there. And what is far more likely to happen, what's virtually guaranteed to happen, is ISPs will not structure their plans to make the internet more efficient overall. They will structure their plans to get as much money out of as many different sources as they can, which means they're going to charge the companies that run high bandwidth stuff like YouTube and Netflix and Hulu. They're going to charge those people a bunch of money on the back end. They're then going to charge we, the consumers, a bunch more money on the front end. In order to, what they'll do is they'll limit the speed or the amount of traffic you can get from streaming video, and then if you pay extra, you'll be able to get various tiered platforms, which may, if you're lucky, end up at the highest tier being equivalent to what we have now as standard. The problem is the motive is wrong. The ISPs are not interested. Their root motive, they have stockholders. These are all humongous publicly owned companies. Their motive is profit. And that's not necessarily going to balance with, I know the law of the free market dictates that profit motive and societal good are completely and permanently combined, but that's not always how these sorts of situations actually work.
Well, you had a lot more to say on that than I thought you would, to be honest. I agree with what you said, although there are some other things I can add to this, technically speaking.
Please do.
So in corporate networks, we would use quality of service and bandwidth modification and throttling for really good health reasons for the network. Things like that are real-time in need for like voice over IP, you would accelerate that traffic and you would diminish maybe streaming video to a lower tier. Or there's a particularly abusive person on your network that's playing World of Warcraft, and while maybe it's not against corporate policy, it doesn't mean that they should necessarily be destroying the network, and so therefore you would throttle that.
Some guy who's running a BitTorrent node and just eating all the traffic in the area.
And so if you could somehow ensure that an ISP using this type of technology would be completely agnostic in their goals in terms of not applying it in a vindictive way, and they did it truly for the health of the platform, so that your last mile coming to your house would give you the best bandwidth performance possible, so your neighbor next door wouldn't necessarily suck up all the bandwidth doing BitTorrent, and therefore you can't watch Netflix. If you could trust them to do that, then there are technological reasons you could argue that this has merit.
Right.
It allows them to use the network to the highest benefit and most efficient way possible, based on the finite resource of bandwidth they're able to provide you.
And net neutrality would prohibit that.
It would. However, the ISPs have also caused and made this bed that they're sleeping into a large degree. They oversell the bandwidth to a community. So there's 10 homes, and they sell all of them more bandwidth than the combined circuit coming into those 10 homes can possibly facilitate if all 10 homes were to use what they are supposedly buying at the same time. That, to me, is selling a resource you don't freaking have.
Overbooking an airline.
If you sell 1 megabit to 10 homes and you're only providing a 1 megabit line, well, not all 10 homes can get 1 megabit when all 10 are trying to use it. So that, to me, is...
That sounds like fraud.
It feels like
legally justified in some manner.
However, oversubscription has been a model for a long time in terms of them keeping their companies solvent. So,
Okay.
But you're playing with this idea of, well, if we sell 10 megabits but not everyone will use it, then we'll be okay. But then when everybody uses it, then suddenly at prime time at 8 o'clock at night, when you go to your 15 megabit line or whatever you have to your house and you test it and it turns out you're getting a megabit, you're getting cheated, in my opinion. So that's a problem as well. So that's a market driver, and it's one of the justifications used by ISPs to have a need for net neutrality is we oversold our circuit, therefore we now have to throttle the circuit to be able to provide quality of service, even though we lied to you in the first place about what we sold you and what you're paying for. That, to me, is fraud.
Yeah.
And that's wrong, and that's one of the reasons that are justified for that. Now, you'll hear people say that I'm an independent small ISP and I need this to be able to keep my network efficient and solvent. I'm sorry, this is going to anger someone. My heart bleeds for you. I don't care. Don't oversell what you can't sell. I'm not going to sell 5 tomatoes when I only have 4. If you can't do it, don't do it. That's my opinion. So sell what you have. Be fair. If you sold a megabit to someone, deliver them the megabit. Don't use some sort of other alternative technology as a workaround to oversubscribing your network.
That makes good sense.
However, so when the government regulations caused, or could have caused, there would be a less competitive environment in terms of a free market, that's a different problem. The Open Internet Act of 2015 strictly said that all bandwidth on the internet has to be treated equally. That, to me, does not seem like an overstep of some sort of overzealous government agency trying to use it to regulate free speech.
Yeah.
And when you look at the size of a government and you look at the size of the corporate oligarchy controlling the internet, who actually has more power?
Well, I'll tell you what, the corporate board has a much easier time making decisions than the government does.
When you, I mean, seriously,
And a lot less transparency.
You can really, I think it's really, you can really sit down and have a hard think on this, whether you agree with me or not. Let's just dwell on this question. Who has more power over your life, the government or Google? That's
a frightening question.
It's a hard question, and it may be the government, maybe it's Google, but the fact is you have to sit and think about it. So if a corporation has that much size and that much power and that much capability to do what it wants, I'm not picking on Google in particular, but Google's a very large one, then you have to wonder what is there to mitigate the power of something that large. Yeah. And the only thing we as a people have as a resource is government. Now, free market, there isn't one. We've already said this, the last mile to your house, you get one provider. Plus the corporate backbone, the oligarchy, and the small backbone providers, what is the internet? There's only a few of them. Only a few, and they control all the data bits that move across that, under the subsea or over the sky or through the internet, through space or whatever. They can collude very easily. Yeah. So considering the amount of power they have over that data flow, you as a person, as an individual, don't have a free market to go, screw you, Google, I'm going to go do something else because your data is going through Google whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
And so therefore you don't have that choice. So we have to, unfortunately, have uncomfortable allies from time to time, and the uncomfortable ally in this situation is regulatory control. Now, I have pushed for, I want to see a digital bill of rights. The internet is now the public square.
It is.
There used to be, you go out on a soapbox, and there used to be in Europe, there'd be this public square, you put your soapbox and sit there and rail about our reptilian overlords, and you were allowed to do that.
That is literally our First Amendment freedom of assembly.
Right, and so you can go do that now, but no one's going to hear you. Where people hear you is on the internet, whether it's a private website, Facebook, YouTube, and YouTube is a whole other conversation. We're talking about just the movement of data. These are the public square, and if we don't protect the public square, we're going to lose it. And the Bill of Rights we have in the United States, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and right to assembly, and all the things that come with the Bill of Rights, we need to extend that into the digital space. And I don't know why the digital space is being perceived as something different than that, because it is the public square. How's that?
All right.
We're going to get a lot of angry comments on that one.
Sure we will.
All right. And here's the last one.
Yeah.
Stepan Razor. Well, that must be his real name, I'm sure.
Yeah.
With the current panic about access to cyberspace, what do you think are the potential alternatives to reliance on large corporations with existing infrastructure? Would it be possible for people to effectively build a distributed network using less resource-intensive infrastructure and have connections as good or better than we have become accustomed to? And how would a layman do this?
No.
Nope, no way possible. Not at all. I hate to say it, but it's not real.
Those, you can see similar sorts of, I see similarities here to things like automobiles. I don't want to have to buy something from a major car company, the colossus of GM. I'll build my own because I can. And you technically can. And it is going to be inferior substantially in every way, but it will probably work. You could set up a ham radio network. I know people who have. Yep. And have your own completely independent communication system that doesn't depend on anything except each individual node having a battery and a shortwave radio. And it will work, and it will be nowhere near as useful, and it will never become publicly mainstream.
Not only that, you would cut yourself out of all of the content that the internet provides. So
yes, that too.
Let me use, it's always a bad analogy, but it's the only one we got. Go build your own highway system. You want to drive your car from Arizona to New York. Do it without going on the highway system.
You can.
Well, I'm saying build your own. Build your own, because that's what you're saying. How do I build my own internet? And the internet is a global infrastructure of literally cables across the ocean, the bottom of the ocean, satellites in space, and it's brought the entire global community together in one place. If you were to be able to even build one of these inferior networks like you're describing, you are going to be dissected and away from what you want to access, which is the aggregate knowledge and information the internet brings. Yep. So now you have to bridge into the internet to bring that into your private network, and it's not feasible. Yeah. This is larger than that, and it has to be in aggregate to have the power and effectiveness and capabilities and human evolutionary process involved with it to be something. Yeah. If you break away from it, you no longer have what it is. If you make your own highway that's no longer part of the interstate, you no longer have the interstate. You have this thing next to the highway that's not as good.
Right. The problem is the internet's strength is the number of people who are connected to it.
All of the nodes on it.
All of the other elements of off-grid independent self-sustainability are dependent. Whether it's successful or not, ultimately it is only required to serve one person.
Think of it as this. A single cellular creature is a small little thing in a pond that's interesting in its own right, and it's life. But multicellular creatures like human beings, an aggregate of multiple cells, become a thing all in of itself. Yeah. And I would say the internet is that multicellular creature that's come together and formed an organism and a hive mind share, for good and for bad, in and of itself. It's become its own thing.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So that's where I'm at. And boy, we have done lots of this.
All right, 5 pages of questions.
A couple things real quick. Get your cool InRange shirts.
Absolutely.
We're both wearing them for once. We finally got some of our own. This is an actual certified stamp of hubris. This is available on the store, as is the Polish Resistance Fighter shirt, which doesn't have the InRange logo on it because we wanted it to have the message.
Yeah, it doesn't need it. This is the first of our vintage operator shirts. We reposted. I should have looked up the guy's name before we had. Really fantastically amazing story of a Polish resistance.
Oh man, he is the epitome of what that shirt's about.
Yeah,
that guy was incredible. In fact, he even willingly went into Auschwitz.
Yeah,
to report back on what was going on. And he's like,
we don't know what this place is. I'll just go in there myself.
He literally said, "Okay, I'll be a prisoner there," and he went in there and became a prisoner in a concentration camp to be able to report back to the Polish resistance what was happening in a concentration camp.
And then a couple of his buddies from the outside got legitimately captured, brought in, tortured. He was afraid that they'd give him up under torture, and so, He did what he had to. He just escaped.
He literally just broke out. He survived World War II.
Yep.
Even all of that, and then became a resistance fighter against the communists.
Yep.
And was eventually caught, tried, and executed by the communists.
Executed in 48.
Yep. But I mean, he continued his fight of resistance for Poland against both sides, which is exactly what that shirt's about.
Yeah.
This shirt is not so noble in its goals. It is just the sin. Everyone, we got so many questions about the stamp of hubris as a shirt that we finally said, well, we better make one.
Yeah.
So we've got that. On top of that, until December 24th, up from now when you see this, until then, you can buy multiple shirts at once at a discount.
Yeah. Yeah. Buy one, get one discounted.
So, cool, guys. If you want to support us, that's one way to do it. Buying merch helps. If another and the best way is to support us via Patreon. This is truly a crowdsourced, viewer-supported project, wholly dependent on you.
Yep.
And that allows you to be in the Q&A as well as for our raffles every month for giveaway stuff. If you can't support us on Patreon, the other big thing you can do for us is subscribe to the channel and share it broadly, because we are not finding the AI bots to do that for us. We need you guys to do that for us. And if you like this kind of stuff, share it with your friends.